Hey guys, tonight we're going to do something a little reckless together. Glide into a perfectly ordinary school day and watch it fold in on itself like paper under rain, while the grown-ups insist it's fine, it's fixed. It never happened, and if it did, please stop asking about it. We'll walk the bus steps, feel the seat vinyl cold at the backs of knees, and listen to the easy chatter about cards and cafeteria pizza. Right up to the moment the sky does that thing skies shouldn't, and a word on a principal's lips squeezes the air out of your lungs. It's a bedtime story that forgets what bedtime means, the kind that rustles the blinds and tests your locks. You probably won't survive this. Kidding, relax. That's just the part of the show where the host laughs and turns the lights down a notch lower than comfortable. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Tell where this is being watched from and the local time. It's fun mapping the little constellation of insomniacs and night walkers in the comments. And it helps the ones who wake at 3:17 realize they're not alone out there. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're not late, not yet, but you walk like the morning is a dare, hoodie sleeves tugged over knuckles, breath thin in the mid-September air, that bright gold kind of cool that says sweaters, but not coats. The bus groans up, glowing amber, and patient as if it knows this road better than you ever will. And you take your usual steps, 3.5 strides to your seat, scuffed floor counting them for you. The driver's weak coffee smell, the aisle chatter about a deck you swear could pull perfect hands if the shuffles were kinder. You slide in, bag wedged like a barricade, and those two familiar voices clatter down the steps at the next stop, jokes landing easy as coins on a counter, the kind of banter that makes a morning seem invincible. Routine has that way of hypnotizing. It takes your pulse, smooths it to its own beat, pats your hair and says, "Hush, nothing sharp today." Out the window, the tree line is as crisp as a pencil edge, black-green against a sky that still remembers summer. And you let your eyes stick there a little too long. It's not a fear, not yet. It's the prickle people call. Someone walked over your grave, as if the earth knows to send invoices in advance. Historians still debate whether the phrase came from old beliefs about a soul's double, or simply the cold logic of drafts in churchyards. But the point is the body keeps a private list of what needs attention, and sometimes it holds that list up to your face, whether you asked or not. School is a rectangle pretending to be a welcome, a box with bells to tell time how to behave. You pass the posters and the trophy case that feels slightly embarrassed about the year it lost its shine. By lunch, the day has convinced you to unclench milk cartons, the clatter of trays with their deep space compartments, a deliciously unfair exchange of snacks, and the ritual that makes adults shake their heads, the punt and pray game that should honestly come with waivers. You're in second person even when you forget. The you of now, the you of then, the you that thinks. It's amazing how often we only notice the ordinary when it's about to give notice. You call for the punt, and the ball arcs like it's trying to meet a version of the sun that isn't quite where it should be, sailing left like a rebellious thought, into the band of trees that wraps the field at exactly the distance that makes teachers say, not too far, which is kid for far enough. Kyle jogs with that loping confidence that hates walls, tossing a hand up without looking back. And you do what everyone does. You watch and smirk and prepare the jokes. But the boy stops, not slows, stops, as if centered in place, as if a word you don't have yet just got typed under his skin, and the cursor won't move. You don't know what you're seeing until you do, because stillness is a kind of scream when it comes from certain people. And Kyle was a boy who didn't put quiet anywhere near his face. He turns toward the field, mouth unhinged in a way that makes laughter sound wrong as soon as it happens around you. And then quick glance back into the trees. A spasm of animal backward crawl. The mutter prayer of someone who can't quite remember how to speak out loud. He gets up without dressing his dignity and just walks, as if the map has been redrawn under his shoes, and all paths lead to a way. Silence is contagious. It spreads across your group the way a cloud crosses a sun in one of those sped-up films from science class. And you find your feet taking you to the edge of the trees like they've been volunteered. The ball is visible. Of course it is. Perched 30 feet in, as if it posed for the photograph you'll never show anyone. The light under the canopy, a pale green you decide not to comment on. You step past the line that is not a line dirt to leaf rot, school to woods, and the pressure in your ears kisses, shut like a plane descending too fast. You swallow on instinct, and the world feels a half-degree tilted, like a table whose leg was shortened by a bored god. You've flown exactly 0 times, but you know enough from movies and car trips over sudden hills to identify your equilibrium tapping on your inner screen. You bend, palm on scuffed leather, and something impossible does the simplest thing, breathes on the back of your neck. It's warm. Not fever warm, human warm in tides, in and out, carrying that sick, sweet note like copper pennies and damp towels left in a gym bag. Sarcasm is a defense mechanism. So you whisper, "Okay, bud, personal space," and spin on your heel quick enough to get dizzy. But what waits behind you is nothing except a friend's face, staged in worry, and the tight verticals of trees who don't do reassuring. "You good," he mouths, and the you that likes jokes blinks behind the glass of your eyes, trying to remember the punchline that would reset the air. You do the kid thing, shake it off like a dog after water, because admitting fear is something you do at 30, not 12, and never in front of a boy who can throw a spiral farther than you. You step out of the tree line thinking, weird is fine. Weird is normal. Weird is the thread that stitches days into stories. And you break the circle with the ball held high like a trophy you didn't earn. But the body keeps receipts. The hairs along your nape choose not to sit down. When the bell finally rattles its metal throat, and the game dissolves into a shuffle of elbows and trash talk, your feet vote for a detour. You could go ask Kyle. You could go see the look again. You could confirm this is just adrenaline wearing a mask. The hallway solves that decision by ringing, by pushing you like a river pushes a leaf, and you land in math with the very specific relief of a worksheet's blank boxes, and a teacher who thinks numbers can heal and sit. Halfway through, your stomach suggests an exit, the legitimate kind, and a hall pass becomes a talisman in your hand as you slip into the humming quiet of an old building's veins. Bathrooms always feel like backstage. You rinse, you glance at your reflection, which refuses to be reliable, and then the light stutters, as if someone upstairs is flipping a very large coin. When you push the door open, the world has decided to be night when it is not, as if a hand pulled a hood over the roof, leaving just enough ambient dark to make you think eclipse, which is a fancy word for shadow, behaving with whatever it believes is authority. You're thinking about eclipses like a trivia host, because fear sometimes arrives holding flashcards. In 585 BCE, a solar eclipse reportedly halted a battle between the Medes and the Lydians. Historians still debate whether it was the astronomical event or a later poetic flourish that turned soldiers into spectators that day. But the idea sticks. Sometimes the sky issues an order, and we obey. The principal jogs into view, with a face rearranged into something you have never seen there, terror in a man who practices announcements, keys jangling like frantic punctuation. And he throws the locks, turns, sees you, and uses a word that makes time press its cold hand to your back. Code silver. You run before the echo finishes, breathing like a phone on low battery, the pass clacking against your thigh, and your teacher's scolding face does the magic trick of converting into command the exact second you say the word. Lights off, bolts slid, desks like barricades in the wrong war, the low chorus of children remembering the drill, filing into the corner, the way fish stack in the shadow of a pier. Your seat in that packed human knot feels too warm, too loud, too close to the door's thin rectangle of glass. And in the hush, there's the oddest nostalgia. You always promised yourself you'd be ready for the real one, for the thing the assemblies threatened would come. But darkness has opinions. You wait for the red exit gleam to be the friend it always is. It isn't. The windows go from dim to saturated black, as if someone didn't turn off a light so much as paint over space. And the tick-tock you hoped for doesn't arrive. You hold the breath even you didn't know you were keeping. And the fan hum you left in your bedroom seems like a superstition you should have carried in your pocket. Someone next to you whispers, "What did you see?" And you have the answer of a ghost. "Nothing, but it looked at me anyway." The building holds itself very still, like an animal playing dead. And you realize you are in a place that believes in rules. It has posters about them, but something outside the door does not. You think, okay, this is the part where it's still a drill, a misunderstanding. A false alarm will laugh about at dinner. The fan hum inside your head disagrees, quietly, kindly, like the way a nurse disagrees. You remember that breath on your neck. If you were telling this later, you'd dress it up as imagination. You are telling it now, and the second person doesn't let you off that easily. You look at the door glass without looking, side eyes like a superstition, and your teacher edges there like she's negotiating with the shape of her own fear. Peeking down the hallway where the air has the weight of a storm cellar before the lid shuts. It's nothing you want to say, but the sky has already put a hood over the day. And the second half of your bus ride, the one that takes you home, is a fantasy you cling to like a coin under your tongue. You keep your hands still. You listen for the sound of someone changing their mind on the other side of the door. What you hear is the whole building deciding what to be next. You step back into the cafeteria's echo with that taste of metal still riding your tongue, like you bit down on a penny and forgot to spit it out. And you tell yourself lunch is a reset button. If you hit it hard enough, the trays are UFOs landing and lifting. The condiment packets bled of ketchup in nervous little spurts. And somewhere a table erupts because someone just balanced a milk carton on a finger and called it talent. That's how normal tries to seduce, with nonsense that asks for nothing except time. You could sit, you could pretend your spine didn't learn a new language in the trees. Instead, your mouth says field and your feet, traitors that they are, carry you to the back doors before you can pin blame on anyone else. Outside, the light is the same color as before, and if you winced just now at the word same, good, because sameness is an alibi, and you know a guilty alibi when you see one. The field doesn't care about your feelings. It sprawls out with that end of summer confidence, the grass mixing green with straw gold. A patchwork quilt thrown over something you're not thrilled to sleep on anymore. You and the others are human marbles spilling out of a jar, gravity tugging cleek to cleek. And by some unspoken law, you all choose violence, light your version of football that deserves an insurance rider and a priest. You've called it a dozen names over the years. Puntan pray you keep your teeth. But the game is always the same. One kid boots the ball like a confession, and the rest of you swarm the poor soul who receives it like the lesson you didn't study for. It is astonishing what an institution will allow on its own lawn. But you take the gift and lace it tight. A kid you barely know makes his run and disappears under a tidal wave of elbows, and good intentions turn to kinetic. Laughter lifts because we're built like that, scaffolding joy on the wobbling beams of risk. You hang back a beat longer than usual, watching the tree line lean in, the same way audience members lean forward when the magician asks for trust. The ball cycles, hands to hands, minor injuries tallied in curses and heroics. And then it finds Kyle, that tornado with shoes, the kid whose punts are long enough to to merit airline snacks, but whose aim should have its own mythological warning label. He grins that grin that shrugs at consequences, plants his foot, and sends the thing into a parabola that would make a physics teacher sigh with pride if it weren't angling for exactly the wrong county. You all watch it go. There's a collective lean left. Like bodies think they can coach a ball by posture alone. And then someone yells a name you're not repeating, and someone else laughs, because it's always safer to be cruel when there's an audience. Kyle jogs toward the tree line with a finger raised that says challenge accepted. And your stomach does the down elevator thing grief does in movies, even though grief is not on the schedule, and no one has bothered to sign it in at the office. The group breaks into commentary, odds on how long he'll take, jokes about him stepping in something gross, a genuine offer to help that collapses before it reaches the mouth that tried to form it. And you, not liking the way the trees look like they're swallowing, fold your arms to pretend warmth. This is how it happens. He reaches the border, and his motion drains away like water from a bowl with a crack you couldn't see until it started. He stands, not like catching a breath, like being caught by one. 10 seconds last long enough to make religion sound practical. You could park a lifetime inside 10 seconds if you wanted to rent it out. Someone yells at him to move it. A word you hope returns to its sender and slaps them. Kyle turns around slow, mouth slack, eyes at that hurting width that makes you want to dim the world a notch so it doesn't glare so hard. Another joke lands because jokes are muscle memory. And then the boy looks back into the trees like an animal that's heard its name said in a voice you never want to imitate. He goes backward, deconstructed heels to dirt, hands scrambling, mutter fragments leaking like beads from a torn necklace. And the group reacts in the only way groups know how when their script fails. They laugh too loud, then too soft, then stop entirely when the shape of his silence refuses to be furniture. He doesn't dust off, doesn't try to salvage cool, doesn't even throw a parting insult. He just gets up and walks toward the building like gravity has been freshly invented in that direction. The field feels the absence the way a stage feels a missing actor. You and your friend exchange a glance that admits you're not brave so much as unwilling to be the kind of person who pretends they didn't see. That's enough to push your shoes across the grass. Up close, the tree line is nothing, just a stitch between mown and knot, school and knot, a scene you've crossed 100 times to retrieve errant fun. The ball sits 30 feet in, polite, as you please, scuffed leather asking for a hero. And you decide you can do this. You can put your hand on that grip. You can step into the place Kyle stepped and not be Kyle. You tell your friend to hang there. You're good. He lifts brows in the punctuation for "are you?" And you step under the canopy where the light turns from cafeteria bulb to aquarium. The temperature shift is a suggestion at first. A cool cloth at the back of the neck. But the moment your palm cups the ball, the ear pop detonates like a cork loosed inside your skull. rushes nowhere. Pressure evicts you and invites you back in the same breath. Your inner ear flickers error, and your body corrects to a stance you didn't plan. It's the tiniest earthquake, just enough to make you aware that your balance is rented, not owned, and the landlord can knock any hour it wants. You straighten with the neat lie forming. Must be a blood sugar thing. And then the hot, cold rhythm of breath presses against your nape with the intimacy of a dare. You, because you are practiced at survival, pivot in a crisp pattern meant to sell confidence, and your eyes find only the rigid geometry of trees, and the worst thing, your friend watching your face like it's a forecast. Nothing, he says before you ask, and you nod because that's the script, while every hair on your body rehearses a different scene. You step out, ball under arm like a trophy won for participation in denial, and the group admits you with the kind of relief that hates itself. Crisis aborted, story saved. Let the chaos continue. You last 3 plays, maybe 4, before your feet discover the edges of the field and decide they love those edges very much. Muscles you trust become attentive to doors and shadows, a vigilance you can't shake, even when someone barrels into you roaring about end zones. You consider breaking rank and going to find Kyle, to hold your question under his nose and see if it sneezes. But the bell is a shepherd, and you're a sheep with a high GPA. On the way back, you look over your shoulder, and because you're paying attention now, you see a detail you'll later file under harmless, probably. A sliver of shadow inside the trees where the shadow should be smooth. A darker vein pulsing faintly, as if it were lit from within by a red you don't have a crayon for. You keep walking because that's the superpower school gives: motion. Motion smooths fear's fur the wrong way, but it still smooths. In the hallway, the white noise returns lockers as percussion, sneakers as shakers, the orchestra of 1,000 small plans being made at once. And you try to remake yourself as one of those plans. You'll fail later. Right now, you have math. Let's make a small pact. We'll keep the facts where they belong, but we won't let them flatten the spine of the story. Here's a fact with a shiver stitched to it. On November 8, 1965, the Northeast blackout plunged 30 million people into darkness. For years, folklore bloomed that a UFO or secret test caused it, and historians still debate whether the mythology rose because the dark was vast, or because humans hate gaps enough to tile them with wonder. You, seated under a poster about integers, are about to become a gap someone will try to tile. You watch the second hand climb and jump, and decide the trees can keep their secrets because numbers would never. But when you ask for the pass, when the little laminated freedom hangs from your fingers, and you slip into the corridor's conditioned air, the sky outside kinks its theater curtains at a time of day that didn't ask for drama. You feel pleasure rise. Ooh, eclipse. Because you are, at base, a creature who loves cosmic special effects. But you have already learned something about breath on necks and pressure that doesn't belong. The bathroom mirror watches you pretend your hands needed washing. The flicker is quick and harmless, the way a cat's tail looks right before the scratch. When the door swings open, the world has cast itself in a role called night, and you are an extra who didn't see the call sheet. Somewhere in you, the field still whispers punt and pray, and you hear the echo come back different this time. Pray and punt. The principal hustles by with a face that makes you file away every time you've lied to your parents about being scared. He throws locks like spells, turns, sees you, and writes the one command into your bones that your bones will reread for years. Code Silver. You run like the hallway is elastic, and you're a small, hard thing bounced along it. Hands remembering doors, feet remembering corners, until your classroom absorbs you, and you learn what it feels like when drills molt and step into their adult skins. You don't look at the window. The window is a rumor now. You look at the door because stories begin with thresholds, and this one already chose its. You learn a lot about a door when you have to listen to it instead of use it. You learn that handles breathe through metal, that hinges have a tick when they cool, that the strip of glass beside it is a theater that runs one scene on loop. Opaque. Your teacher's silhouette is a thin line trying not to shake, a tuning fork of a person who once believed rules were spells and is currently renegotiating her theology on a minute-by-minute plan. The class compresses until even whispers feel too loud to risk, and you angle your body so your shoulder absorbs the run of the cinder block. Concrete is steady in a way humans aren't, and tonight you're into steady. Someone sniffles, someone huffs, someone's bracelet clicks against someone else's phone in a Morse code for please don't, and you set your breath to the pace of the fan you left on this morning, imagining the soft hum is here, a sonic night light you can swallow. No one says your name. Your name would be a stone dropped in the tar of this quiet. It would vanish, and the ripples would look like nothing except the thing you wish were still outside. You hold yourself less like a child and more like a piece of furniture cataloging the room. Second person gives you that permission to become inventory and witness at the same time. The voice that swivels without needing to turn ahead. If you tilt 2 inches, you can see the window, and you do, because the body is a loyal saboteur. What looks back is not glass, but velvet. A cloth pulled over an eye by a hand that isn't gentle. You think eclipse again, because trivia is the tastiest armor you've got. But even eclipses know to offer a rim of light, a ring, a promise of return. This is a hiatus with no PR team. There is a history bite you carry like a mint. Before clocks were popular, church bells governed the day. Absence of a bell sounded wrong in the marrow. Historians still debate whether that unease sculpted ghost stories around bell towers that rang on windless nights. You latch on because goose flesh loves context, and you roll that fact between tongue and teeth until the metal taste is subdued enough to swallow. If this were fiction, you'd expect a knock now, the world you've had so far obeyed foreshadowing like a school rule. The world you're in respects no syllabus. Sound arrives wrong. It's a long, low-pressure groan that starts as if the building is doing yoga and ends with glass deciding it has hated its job for years. The crash is not theatrical, it's bored, workmanlike. A series of smashes that suggest something is not coming in through a door, because doors are for the enrolled. Metal follows creak, torque. A locker's squeal as it discovers new angles. The noises don't line up in a way your head wants. And that mismatch is the part that makes little sounds leak from throats around you. Half sobs, half swallows. Your teacher lifts one finger, the universal SHH you've seen since kindergarten. But the tear hitching on her cheek is a tiny moon reflecting a very specific tide. Light then. It isn't light like flip the switch, or here comes a phone screen, or open flame, run. It's a soft shimmer with a blush of red that behaves like it has a heartbeat and maybe an opinion about you. It leaks at first, a seam in the dark stitched badly. Then it brightens by degrees, not a dimmer, but a living thing testing brightness, the way a singer tests pitch. The windows earn their keep again, not transparent, but suffused, like something is breathing light against them from close range, and the hallway gains a kind of dusk that has never looked at a sunset and doesn't care to. Your brain wants to schedule it. Flashlight. No, the hue is off. Lantern. No heat waves, no smoke. You find yourself thinking of deep sea fish, and then hate yourself for being the kind of person who thinks of trivia at a time like this. But let's be honest. Quirky facts are guardian angels with glasses. There's a fish, the stoplight lucijaw, whose red bioluminescence is invisible to most prey. A private wavelength. It makes you wonder how many things on land learned the same trick and taught their children to keep secrets about it. Historians still debate whether sailors' tailies of crimson seas or algae blooms or eyes adjusting to fear. Either way, cultures built warnings around colors for a reason. The red in the hall is the color of a warning that pretends not to be. Footsteps, but not. A wet, suctioned shuffle, as if sneakers got replaced by mouths, as if somewhere nearby is a field of mud that only one traveler knows how to cross. You go very still in the way of prey that hasn't decided whether to sprint or hope. A thud meets your door soft as a forehead, and the handle jiggles, not furious, curious. There's a sentence that wants to form, let me in, but it's your brain matching a rhythm, not your ears catching syllables. Patterns are your species' drug, and you drink. The handle tries again. The red brightens to say please. Your teacher does not stand at the window anymore. She crouches behind a wheeled cart, and you love her for choosing the floor. The light changes like a person tapping their foot. 2 pulses strong, one soft, then gone. The footsteps recede the way waves do when they decide you've learned enough about tide for one day. You don't exhale. Exhaling would be a betrayal. Your lungs practice being furniture a little longer. And then, very slowly, someone sobs into a sleeve because someone always has to pay the first installment on a feared debt. The hall answers with a sound that erases. It's a scream, yes, but it's one of those screams you read about in puzzle boxes. The kind that gets cut off not because the screamer stopped, but because the part of the world in charge of carrying sound decided to clock out. There's a thumping, a skirmish of object against object, the world hitting the world. And then the building inhales a silence so thick it feels like fresh paint. Time, which you thought was broken, remembers its job again, but only in loops. Minutes repeat their flavors. Hour-long seconds congeal, and warm and congeal again. And your legs go to pins and needles to remind you you're not a chair. If fear were gore, this would be the part where we would talk about it. It isn't, so we won't. PG-13 means dread does the work. And dread is a craftsman if you give it quiet. Someone's phone vibrates in a desk, and plate spins panic until whoever owns it finds the courage to go bone still and let the sound die. The red light fades in a corridor nearby and blooms in another like a traveler checking locks, interested in the map of doors as a new kind of geography. When you were younger, someone told you about the 1666 Great Fire of London and added, like a joke's last line, that people claimed to hear the city scream. Historians still debate whether those testimonies were metaphor, hysteria, or the way timber and iron really do cry when heated past purpose. It comes to you now because lockers, you decide, can weep when warmed beyond their contracts, and because the mind will borrow any old story if it makes the present one easier to categorize. You catalog the sensation and think, remember this, tell this, and then feel sick because that assumes an after. You imagine opening the door. Second person is a dare. You imagine stepping into the red and telling it to knock politely next time. You imagine saying you already guessed the punchline. You're not a person. You're a weather event. Then you imagine your teacher's hand around your wrist, strong, saying no. We live if we act like animals a while longer. And you listen, because animals got tenure on this planet for a reason. Your mind drifts to breath on your neck in the trees, to the exact cadence, 2 beats, pause, 2 beats, and you wonder if cadence is a signature. And if you've just met the same author in a different room, when the light vanishes, it doesn't go far so much as it goes thin. The velvet remains, the hush remains, your knees remain, and somewhere in the building, a door opens not because anyone wanted it to, but because the thing with the private red light drew a line between want and can. If you close your eyes, you can map the hall by echoes, you do, because mapping is the opposite of collapse. You give yourself benchmarks when the hum of the soda machine returns, when the exit sign goes from suggestion to fact, when the air stops tasting like pennies. And somewhere in that list, your pulse finds a tempo you could sleep to if this were that kind of channel. It isn't. You're awake, alive, and pinned to the dark like a specimen under a tidy Latin label, student, lockdown, unobserved. You ask a question without moving your lips. Are we prey because we're small, or because we organized ourselves into lines and bells and drills? The answer doesn't come. The answer continues jiggling handles down the corridor you can't see. Patient as rain on a tin roof, you will not be brave today in the way movies want. You will be the kind of brave that requires stillness, the kind that resists becoming noise. And when at last the hush cracks, not with screaming, but with the thin voice of sirens learning your school's name, you will stand up out of the corner with a tremor in your knees that will become a long story you pretend to tell for other people. The sirens don't arrive yet. What arrives is an agreement you make with your breathing. Stay small, stay steady. Pretend to be furniture longer than you thought possible. And imagine the fan hum from your room has learned to travel. A ghost sound that curls up like a cat on your shoulder and purrs you through the minutes. You count the purrs because counting is a leash for panic. A simple arithmetic that says, if you can get to 50, you can get to 100, and so on, until you're walking yourself across a tightrope made of numbers. The door's rectangle of glass stays blank. No faces, no badges, no eyes. Only the occasional smear of that wrong red flicker that fades as soon as you name it with your mind. As if names were bad manners here. You don't say your own name either. Your teacher doesn't say anyone's name. Names feel like handles, and you've heard enough handles jiggle today. Then the building exhales, not like relief, more like a house settling in a storm. Timbers telling each other where the weight is now, how to carry it, how to keep the roof from remembering it, could choose sky if it wanted. It's strange what the body decides to like under duress. The tiny chemical sting of dry erase markers in the dark. The way carpet holds a day's worth of feet and smells like work done. The press of your shoulder blades against cinder block that radiates its own basement cool. Someone in the cluster whispers a prayer that's half cliche and half apology for thinking of themselves. And no one shushes them, because shushing would admit to being in charge. You are not in charge. You are 12, and you are currently doing the only adult thing that matters, not making a sound. There is a point in every blackout when the world reconsiders light. You feel that hinge swing now, a grain of sand turn, and the darkness lifts, not like a shade, but like moisture, thinning from syrup to broth, revealing the bones of desks and knees, and a teacher's hand on a phone that forgot how to dial. You let yourself glance at your watch, because it is a tiny sun that belongs to you and will not spill on the floor. 4:56 p.m. And wait, that's a betrayal, because you know full well that lunchtime was not days ago. And yet the sky has strong-armed itself into evening and back again in a breath. You consider the word eclipse one more time, and a footnote writes itself in your skull. On May 19, 1780, New England had a dark day. Cattle went to roost, birds fell quiet, and the midday sky slid into ink Historians still debate whether it was smoke, fog, or ash, but the stories came away with a doctrine. The sky is not obliged to make sense to you. Quirky add-on, in some towns that day, people ate an extra meal because time felt longer, as if hunger keeps its own clock and refuses to be fooled, which is your way of giving your stomach permission to growl now without doom attached. When the first siren threads the air, it feels like an invitation for your heart to resume its job. You let it cautiously, like turning the water back on after a long winter, and listening for pipes that burst. The intercom, dead for what feels like a novel, coughs alive with a voice that should be soothing, but sits wrong because adults sound different when they're reading off a script they didn't rehearse. Remain in place. Do not open the door. Officers are on site. The words "remain in place" turn into glue. The words "officers are on site" make part of you try to stand even as your knees lobby hard for staying the color of chalk. You wait as instructed because obedience is the scaffolding you were issued at birth. It never promised to be comfortable, just load-bearing. The door opens only when uniforms have multiplied outside it so thoroughly that the glass shows a quilt of Kevlar and equipment, and the complicated human posture people wear when they've arrived too late to stop a thing and must do the next thing instead. The officer's voice is a soft saw rasping through a lock of fear. We're going to move you. Hands on shoulders. Stay quiet. And hands rise instinctively as if you volunteered. As if this were a team-building exercise and not a harvest of the living. You stand on legs you don't claim. Feel knuckles brush the cotton of the shirt in front of you, and join the human caterpillar that inches into the hall where the world remembers enough light to upset you. The red you saw earlier has been replaced by a more human red. Exit strobes, police beacons through frosted glass. But the hallway carries a wound you do not have words for. Heat-warped lockers slumped like melted chocolate bars. Door hinges twisted. A section of tile blown up into a curl like a tongue surprised out of a mouth. PG-13 keeps you from dwelling. And anyway, the mind supplies its own deflection. You think of how the ancient Romans built hypocausts to channel heat under floors, and how a good system warmed rooms without fire. Historians still debate whether certain bathhouse collapses were due to workmanship or ground heave. But either way, masonry remembers being rearranged by heat and pressure. Quirky bit to hold between your teeth. In some cloistered libraries, monks inked "Beware the bookworm" into margins. A literal worm warning that doubled as a metaphor for ideas that burrowed. You think of that when you see a locker door puckered, as if something chewed but didn't need a mouth. You let your head stay up because watching is a way of being brave that doesn't require heroics. And you follow the line downstairs that stutter with grit, and past a bulletin board whose cheerful pastel borders have gone the color of old meat under a film of soot. Then outside. Outside is a word that means wind, and the way trees never sign non-disclosure agreements. It means sirens becoming chorus instead of solo. It means a line of parents at the periphery, vibrating between staying back and breaking ranks. Your family's arms are a weather system, hot around your shoulders, wet against your hair, and your own arms, which did not ask to be part of this, go up and do the job anyway, clinging to the familiarity that survived. The officer is still talking, the word reunification point trying to become friendly in your ear. Police tape strings itself like festive bunting that flunked its audition. You look back because you're that kind of person, and you see men and women with tools meant to measure and contain. And their tools act like they've met this flavor of wrong before and didn't like it, but know how to speak to it. Evening keeps pretending to be the part of day it isn't, and your watch insists on a time that refuses to match the temperature of the light. It's as if the sky is trying out faces in a mirror, and none of them fit. You ask a question, and your parents, the fiercest translators you know, tell you not yet, not while the tape is up, not while cops' voices sound like this. Later, at home, after showers that last longer than they should, and the kind of quiet meals people pretend are normal, you will learn the word radiation from a man in a hood who wants to be kind and cannot figure out how to be in a suit that eats his voice. Right now, still in the grass by the buses, you only know that your skin feels like the air took a second look, and left fingerprints no one else can see. They tell you don't panic, and you honor the spirit, if not the letter. The panic you keep is folded small, like a paper charm you wedge under your tongue to keep it from falling out when adults ask you how you're doing. You make a private inventory because this is your new religion. Breath, names of friends spotted in the crowd, the count of squad cars, the exact quality of the melted locker metal, soft, slump, wave, and the feeling behind your knees that says you'll run if someone asks without the asking part, somewhere out on the edge of the parking lot. Black-windowed vans have rolled up with a hush loud enough to notice. They don't wear names, and you decide anonymity is a uniform too. You add that to the inventory with the calm of a scientist, even if the clipboard in your head shakes a little in your trembling hand. PG-13 means we keep our eyes on the edges, so we will. August noses at the police tape, tugs it like a child begging to go home. The sky forgets itself into blue again with a blush of apology, and then remembers it doesn't owe anyone that. You imagine your bed, the fan hum, a flashlight under your pillow just in case, and the way second person will feel against your ear when you hit play on this story again later to check whether it still happens if you listen twice. It will. That's how some days work. They play back at volume 1 in the middle of chores, and at volume 10, when you turn off the lights, they reissue themselves until you learn the trick of saying. And then, instead of again, you move when they tell you to move. You let yourself be small when smallness buys you hours. You look at the tree line one more time and think of a boy who walked toward it, and a breath you did not see, and you tell yourself you are not prey, because you learned the shape of stillness fast. The living room looks like a hospital that forgot its beds. Plastic on doorknobs, trash bags over vents, a note on the fridge that says, water only, no ice, and a clear path taped across the carpet, like a runway for people who don't want to touch what they can't see. You sit where they point. A soft chair that feels like a mouth swallowing your outline. And your mother's hands hover the way hands do when they want to fix a thing, with the kind of magic that has never existed, but refuses to admit it. The van outside idles with the patience of a machine paid by the minute. And men in suits that make them look like punctuation marks finish their quiet unpacking of instruments you'd call gadgets if the air weren't working so hard to be heavy. One of them asks for your name and your birthday, and the part of you that's good at tests answers without cracking, like a vending machine, giving what's asked for because someone fed it exact change. Radiation is a word you knew before today. Cartoons taught you. Yellow triangles in science posters taught you. The way adults pronounce it taught you soft, slow, sanded down, like it might hear you and prefer polite. The man who explains doesn't say the word until he is asked if the headache is pounding or squeezing, if the nausea is waves or spikes, if the light makes your eyes want to fold up like paper birds. When he gets there, it's a parenthetical, a caution. We're seeing signs consistent with layered under phrases like not alarming and short exposure. And you are safe now. You measure the safety by the way he keeps his chin angled away from you, by how he remembers not to touch his mask, by how the meter he sets on the coffee table clicks like a bug that learned Morse. Your mother's face tries on 3 expressions, none of which fit. Your father nods too slowly, as if he's listening to a radio under a lake. Dinner smells wrong because hunger has a new job. You take 2 bites of something bland and apologize to the trash. Can because you are human, and our species thanks objects when we're trying to be civilized about failing. Quirky fact to hold like a coin under your tongue. In some old apothecaries, doctors labeled preparations of radium as invigorators, selling glow as cure. Historians still debate whether it was optimism, ignorance, or commerce that pushed the tonic with the burn. You think of that when the man says monitoring period, when he sketches a timeline on a pad where the days are fat and the hours refuse to be thin. What happens to a story when the clock disagrees with the sky is that the brain hoards metaphors like dry wood, so you hoard eclipse that isn't, dusk that behaves badly, red light that acts like a heartbeat, lockers remembering how to melt without fire. Night plays fair by arriving when you expect it, and then cheats by bringing the same dream 3 times in a row. The fan is on because you told it to keep the room honest. The sheet is pulled to your chin because childhood refuses to evacuate entirely. Your eyelids do that twitchy thing like a movie reel with damaged sprockets, and the film it runs is the tree line, the breath, the door handle jiggle, and the wrong kind of light choosing your classroom, the way a tourist chooses a window table. PG-13 doesn't let the dream show you gore, and it doesn't need to. Dread is richer when it keeps its teeth behind closed lips. You float in the hallway between choices, the part of the dream where you can do anything, and you decide to practice stillness again, because stillness saved you once, and habits become rituals when they prove themselves. Morning's news is a blackout. Not the power. Power is fine. Your lamp does its job. The kettle knows its work. The blackout is the world's refusal to speak your language back to you. No reports, your parents say. No ongoing situation at local school. No reporters parked on the street. No helicopters forcing wind against roofs so they can steal shots of tape and uniforms. The paper, which is still a thing you get because your father likes the part where ink smudges his thumb, says weather, elections, and an op-ed about Halloween costumes. Nothing about red light in middle-day corridors. Historians still debate whether the 1942 Battle of Los Angeles was mass hysteria, whether balloons or the sound of a country new to being afraid in its own sky. What has never been debated is how quickly official words can smooth a terrified city flat if that serves the hour. You watch your mother watch the window while pretending to watch the weather and think, this is what smoothing looks like. This is how floors get waxed until they shine enough to distract you from the fact that you're walking a place that remembers blood. Your head still hurts like a light left on behind your eyes, and your stomach is a tide chart. But when the man in the suit returns, he smiles more with his eyebrows and tells you your numbers look encouraging. He uses phrases like declining exposure profile and no long-term sequelae anticipated that would be comical if they weren't wheeled like furniture into the middle of your living room. He asks you to describe the light. You say red, and then wince because red is a crayon, not a physics word, and he nods like crayons are fine in a pinch. He asks you to describe the sound. You say wet footsteps, and he nods again and writes something that isn't that, and your father watches the pen move and swallows a word he doesn't trust to set down. You text 2 people because 2 is the number that feels right. More than 2 is conspiracy. Fewer is begging. 1 writes back, you good. And you type fine because you like them and don't want the shape of you in their head to include the way you learned to be furniture in the dark. The other replies, heard they found nothing. And you stare at nothing while remembering melted something. And the part of you that loves sarcasm prepares a remark and then lets it go because sarcasm eats energy you need for other things. You set your phone face down and listen to the fridge hum, the house's version of your bedroom fan, and count again. Numbers like stones in a pocket. Late afternoon, the neighborhood's soft routines return like birds. A screen door pop, the hose coughing at the flower beds, a basketball finding and missing, and finding a hoop. You step onto the porch because outside is the opposite of corners, because air that has touched faraway trees tastes less accusatory across the street. A woman you've known since you were 5 is bleaching her porch rail, and she looks up with a smile that stops 3 inches short of the eyes. Heard school will be closed a bit, she says, and laughter tries on a jacket in her throat and decides against it. A bit, you confirm, and neither of you asks why, the way neighbors never ask about the ambulance that came in the night and left quietly with both lights off. Let's anchor this in something older than us, because age calms certain kinds of nerves. In 1914, during the Christmas truce of World War I, soldiers sang across trenches and passed cigarettes up to the line. Historians still debate whether fraternization was widespread or myth inflated, but everyone agrees that, for a moment, rules paused, and people remembered a different shape of themselves. You bring that here without meaning to, thinking of the pause, the way your school remembered neither clocks nor classes for a stretch that your watch refuses to honor. You think of red light that behaved like a lantern, without flame and footsteps, that didn't fit the shoes you know. The truce ended, the rules returned. Your school will reopen. This is the script. Your gut, which has been a better historian than the papers lately, asks you to notice how quiet those black window vans drive when they pass the stop sign at the end of the block. That night, the dream edits itself. The door handle doesn't jiggle, your own does. And you wake with your hand wrapped around air, twisting a thing that isn't there. And you whisper, no, very gently, like you're correcting a child. PG-13 says stop. Before you tip, you obey, slowing your breath back to the fan's unhurried river, checking the room's corners for anything that glows a color you can't name without borrowing someone else's dictionary. When sleep returns, it brings a gift. A hallway, but empty, a school, but warm, a sky, but honest. You practice walking it as if rehearsal matters, counting steps, naming doors, promising yourself that if the word comes again, if the locks snap down and the air turns velvet, you will be furniture at the speed of thought, and you will live. They bring you back to the school, the way a museum brings back a loaned painting, gingerly, on a schedule, with a lot of paperwork that insists precision is the same thing as safety. The bus windows show you a building that looks like it's practicing normal from the outside, and the part of you that loves sarcasm wants to clap and say, bravo, you nailed it, until the engine cuts and the applause in your head dies at the curb. You're briefed in the gym under a scoreboard that insists time can be counted and stopped at will. A voice from the district thanks you for patience and cooperation, and for not speculating publicly, as if rumor were a contagion they can vaccinate against. With gratitude, you are issued a new hall pass with a barcode, and it hangs from your neck like a visitor badge in your own life. Walking back into the hallway, you notice the scrubbed places most, the shine so thorough it fails to be friendly, the air just a shade drier than air likes to be, the way someone made effort into a smell. Lockers stand at attention with new hinges, and the buckled sections of tile have been uncurled and replaced. Squares of time laid down where time misbehaved. You catch yourself scanning for scorch that isn't there and feel silly for missing a wound. A bulletin board announces, "Welcome back," in rainbow bubble letters, and you think of ships that put cheerful flags up after storms, and how it helps no one if you insist on reading the sky out loud. You keep your head down the way your legs keep moving, and you are almost proud of how much like a student you still remember how to be. The door to your math room is the same door, and it is not. You measure the distance between those truths and file it under tolerable for now. Your teacher's voice has reached a new octave labeled steady, and she passes out worksheets like she's feeding anxious animals, one page at a time. Flat palm, soft words, eyes a little wider than comfort. You meet the numbers where they live, because numbers don't ask what you saw, or when you last slept, or whether the red light felt like a heartbeat pressed against glass. They just purr when you line them up correctly, like feline gods that accept offerings without moving. PG-13 means the mind will volunteer images even when you offer it algebra. You drag it back by the scruff and sit it in the desk beside you until it stays. By lunch, laughter has returned in little domestic portions. It sounds like cutlery, safe and ordinary. And you appreciate the way somebody snorts milk through their nose by accident, as if the world needed a reminder that stupidity is a renewable resource. You step outside because air is the best thing about most days, and the field isn't afraid to be a field in daylight. The tree line, though, holds its breath like a punchline. It hasn't decided whether to tell. You don't seek it. You stand where the grass is blunt, and the sun insists on being literal. And you talk about nothing with someone who is also pretending to talk about nothing. And the two of you cooperate in the delicate art of leaving a silence unnamed. The stories start because stories always start. Someone says a kid saw eyes in the floor drain in the locker room. Someone else says a janitor found a puddle that glowed when the lights were off. And by 7th period, a rumor has graduated to legend. Kyle didn't move away. Kyle learned how to walk where we can't see. You say nothing and nod at the correct angles, because you've read enough to understand folklore grows on wounds, like moss grows on stone. You also know quirky truths stick. Medieval scribes blamed nightmare on a hag who sat on sleepers' chests, and modern neurologists call it sleep paralysis. Both are trying to explain the same pressure, and neither has to be wrong. Historians still debate whether these layered explanations are competing or complementary, if demons were metaphors for neural cascades, or if metaphors were just what we used before we had wiring diagrams. You find comfort in the debate, because debate suggests a room where people sit and talk and drink coffee, and your day already needs a room like that. After school, the parking lot empties like a drained tub, and you walk the long way to your ride because you want to see the corridor from the outside. one that held the wrong red, like a breath against a palm. The glass shows you your own reflection and the ghost of fluorescent tubes. And your face is too young to be a witness and just old enough to know it. You lean in, curious against your better judgment, and the temperature near the glass feels 2 degrees cooler than the air on your cheekbone. Like the hallway behind it is politely insisting on its own weather. You take a step back because you don't need science to tell you boundaries can be sensed. You just let the sense do its work. At home, you Google things you shouldn't, terms you don't understand well enough to be responsible with, charts that turn units into comfort, diagrams of electromagnetic spectra that remind you of rainbows without rain. The web gives you facts that feel like permission slips. Background radiation, dose equivalents, cosmic rays that pelt everyone everywhere all the time, and usually don't care. Radium girls who painted watch dials and learned the hard way that glow in the dark can mean glow in the bone. Historians still debate whether the company's culpability was ignorance turned malice, or malice since noon. Either way, the teeth on that story are not the kind you want near your bedtime. You close the laptop because second person shepherds the night, and you need the night to lie down. Sleep negotiates again, bringing you a hallway with doors that refuse to be themselves. You walk past your own classroom, and the glass has been replaced by something less honest, shimmer that presses against your name like a mirror with breath behind it. You are PG-13, even in dreams. You do not look too long. You do not open anything. You practice the art of moving away without admitting retreat. The choreography of survival that doesn't insist survival must be pretty. The fan hum is your ally, your hypnotist, your gentle conspirator. You forget you asked it to be, and it works anyway, grinning with invisible teeth. You wake with the answer to a riddle you didn't know you'd been asked. The light wasn't light, it was an attention, and it only looked red because that's the crayon your head had available. Morning brings paperwork stapled to expectations. The school sends a letter about counseling resources that reads like it was written by competent ghosts, and your parents circle phrases that feel like life preservers tossed from a ship that didn't stop. You agree to talk to someone in an office with plants that don't quite belong to this zip code. The counselor listens like a person who understands how to open a jar without spilling, and says the word normalize in a way that doesn't make you want to scream. You leave with a breathing exercise that translates anxiety into math. 4 counts in, 6 counts out. Repeat until your nervous system forgets its own name, and you put it in your pocket like a talisman next to the fan hum and the ritual of stillness. Outside, the sun holds where it should, and the tree line is a zipper you can ignore, and your legs carry you forward because forward is the direction of school buses, not because forward is wise. And then, because the world loves a callback, you hear a door handle jiggle when no door is near. It's a sound from your memory misfiring. You tell yourself, a muscle twitch in the part of your brain that catalogs terror and misfiles it under Tuesday. PG-13 says laugh. So you laugh small to yourself, just enough to remind your bones you are allowed. And you keep walking, counting the steps to the curb, to the mailbox, to the corner, practicing how not to be a door the next time something knocks. Remember the public fact from earlier. New England's dark day, candles at noon, red sun, birds sleeping. Historians still debate whether smoke, fog, or fire wore the sky's face that day. But the lesson is simple. Sometimes day ends without asking, and your job is to light what you can reach. You thumb your phone's flashlight on and off once, a private ritual you'll forget you made. And somewhere a part of you that learned furniture remembers it can be a lamp too. The body keeps its own clock, and yours declares 5 p.m. with a petty certainty, even while the sun pitches noon on your skin. When the sirens arrive for real this time, they fit the light badly, like a dress rehearsal held at the wrong hour on purpose. Officers fan through the halls in pairs, the way fear likes to travel, and shepherd what's left of your day into lines labeled, accounted for, and still looking. And that last label makes your mouth taste like pennies again. Outside, the cordon is wider, the tape fresher, the vans blacker, as if new caution keeps arriving by the truckload. Neighbors watch from porches the way towns do, performing curiosity to cover the humility of relief. This happened over there, not here. Thank goodness. How terrible. You breathe like the counselor taught 4 counts in, 6 counts out, and the fan hum you trained at home sits obediently in your chest, purring along the counts and keeping the panic on a short leash. They move you past the worst of it, but buildings gossip. You catch phrases in the architecture, bubbled paint, a hairline crack that spiderwebs away from a door frame that used to be square, the burnt sugar curl in a plastic wall clock that lost its minutes to heat without flame. It isn't gore and doesn't need to be. PG-13 Dread is a master carpenter with a taste for small seams, and your mind supplies both less and more than you're ready for. Your shoes carry you where shoes are supposed to carry students, to a bus, to a curb, to a cluster of adults making promises with their mouths, while their eyes inventory the edges of the sky for anything that looks like a return. Someone asks what you saw. You make your voice a museum placard, a red that wasn't, a light that felt like attention pressed against glass, a handle that jiggled with curiosity and not malice, which might be worse if you think about it for too long. Home again, and the news is still an empty plate. No official statement, no crawl, no talking head explaining how the Battle of Lowe's Angels was nerves, and weather balloons and searchlights arguing with shell bursts, until the air got tired of being misread. Historians still debate which part of that 1942 night was hysteria and which was hardware. But everyone agrees the official tone eventually settled on false alarm, like a cat choosing a windowsill, another site frames it as a case study. A weather balloon, a red flare, and a city primed by an attack the day before. War nerves, the phrase from the report says. And it's a tidy phrase, tidy enough to hide things behind. You picture searchlights crisscrossing, tracing invisible geometry in the dark, catching their own shrapnel and mistaking it for shapes with intention. And you think, on some nights, intention is the thing we're most eager to project. Your parents look at you like the question they want to ask is illegal, and the answer would be classified even if you had it. Sleep doesn't line up cleanly for a while after that, falls sideways, catches on the lint of what ifs and lands at odd hours. You wake once with your hand around your bedroom door handle, twisting nothing, and your whisper of "not now" is so soft the fan hum steals it and pretends it thought of the line first. Mornings bring a slowdown in the official presence. One fewer van today, two fewer the next, and the building reopens along a timeline. No, one distributes on paper. In homeroom, the announcements take long detours through gratitude and resilience, and free counseling sessions in the old choir room. The word normal gets invited on stage and performs a surprisingly convincing impression of itself. You let the performance work because grades are due, and because the body loves a routine, even when its owner is suspicious of the set. The first week back, a girl from your science class leaves midway through third period white as a page, and you hear later she thought someone was standing in the lab sink watching her through the drain. By lunch, that becomes eyes in the drain. By last, Bellet's hands. Another day, two kids swear they passed the principal in the East Hall. Only he didn't turn his head when they said "sir." And when they looked back, he was gone, and the hall smelled like hot coins. The adults respond with the kind of silence you get in museums when an alarm beeps. The hush that says, "Please, don't embarrass the painting any further." Folklore sprigs pop everywhere. A light reported at the base of the auditorium seat E12 that flickers wrong. A locker that refuses to take a combination on any day that rains. The girl who has sleep paralysis and calls it the old hag when she's joking, and something else when she isn't biocultural. Your brain supplies, remembering that paper that pinned Newfoundlands, hag-ridden to Rem-Atonia. Historians still debate whether folklore explains neurology or neurology explains folklore. And you decide the debate is beside the point when your chest feels like a seated weight is counting your breaths with you. People say, "I woke up and couldn't move," and the counselor says, "That happens sometimes." And both statements are trying to be kindnesses. You return to the field like you promised yourself you wouldn't, and the sky is innocent of everything except weather. Late day, the light is that honey color that makes even parking lots feel cinematic, and the tree line is a simple line drawn in a good pen. You go alone, not because it's brave, but because explanations are harder to tell to groups. There's a hiss in the leaves, as if someone put your name through a radiator. and you tell yourself not to listen because names are handles, and you have had enough of those. 30 feet in, the ball is not there because of course it isn't. But the air has a mischief you recognize, a pressure against the inner ear that makes you swallow twice. The subtle promise of attention trying to assemble itself. You say your breathing counts out loud, which is a kind of spell. In 4, out 6, again, again. And the trees decide to perform being trees for 1 more minute. You test a hypothesis you didn't know you had. You take a step toward where the breath would be and tilt your head to offer the back of your neck. It's the opposite of what animals do, which makes it smarter or dumber depending on the animal and the day. The air warms a whisper. It isn't touch, isn't wind, isn't anything the school's meter could click about. And yet, your skin decides to have opinions. You hold, and the world holds. And then you shake your head like a swimmer clearing water and step backward into ordinary, where grass is an obedient texture again, and your own shoulders drop 2 centimeters without asking permission. Nothing happens, that's the headline. The subhead is that the nothing is a choice the place made for now, and choices can be rescinded. As the sun lays its coins along the top of the tree line, you think about New England's dark day again, not because you love repeating trivia, but because light misbehaving has a club, and your little town got a membership card without applying. Smoke and fog, one article says, and cloud. And it's nice how those words are made of things you can point at. Historians still debate the recipe, but the taste is documented birds confused, candles at noon, a red sun that set through cloth. Your hallway felt like that. Not absence, but presence layered wrong. Ingredients out of order. You file the metaphor where you keep breathing exercises and fan, hum, and the memory of your teachers. 1 finger, SHH. You leave the woods with your spine doing the spider check, up, down, up, and laugh at yourself, because all fear is a version of grooming, and you are allowed to keep yourself tidy at night. You read a longer piece about the radium girls because your brain wants to use a sad, old story to measure the shape of this new one. Women painted watch dials with poison they were told was sparkle, and when they glowed, it was first a party trick and then a verdict. And it took years for anyone official to say, we were wrong. With their mouths and pens, you scroll another page. Union work, court dates, bones that shone, and the slow movement of law that learned to notice. Historians still debate how much the bosses knew and when they knew it. But everyone agrees the women paid the tuition for a class. The rest of us got to attend for free. You think of the men in suits with their meters and their words like profile and sequelae. And you allow yourself a petty, quiet hope that if anyone lied to your parents, paper will make that lie heavy someday. You click the screen off and let the room go dark in the approved way, the way light learns to leave when asked. You won't dream of doors tonight. You'll dream of numbers that fit, of hall passes that open on regular noise, of a principal who shakes his head and signs the late slip while telling you to take it easy. The fan says good job, and keeps humming, because that's what it does. You breathe in 4 and out 6, and fall down the long kind of sleep that returns whatever it borrowed at the start. Before you go, a last thought sits on the pillow beside your ear. Maybe it wasn't an arrival. Maybe it was a borrowing of light, of time, of corridors, of breath. Because some things don't cross over so much as they reach and rearrange what's already here. If that's true, you reason, then doors are a courtesy and not a boundary. And your job is to be less of a handle and more of a wall. The first kid goes missing from a roll call, not a headline. And absence makes a different sound from fear. It's drier, papery. The rustle a teacher's mouth makes when it runs through a list and swallows a name that does not answer back. People say his family moved. People say his aunt in another state needed help. People say a lot of things that point the same direction without daring to look at it for long. And your tongue learns the shape of maybe, like it's a vitamin you have to take with water. Officially, it's no comment and privacy please. And the counselor reminds everyone that rumors are like brush fires in a dry summer, quick, hungry, and not picky about what they eat. And you count breaths so your body doesn't try to put one out with your hands. You think of the principal who locked the doors, the janitor who knew the building's bones, and Kyle who looked into the trees before any of you had the vocabulary to call what stared back attention. And the hallway seems to widen around those names, as if to make room for something you cannot see. They replace the hinges again on a door that didn't ask for it, because sometimes repair is a ritual more than a necessity. And you watch a worker in a plain polo run a finger along the jamb, the way a parent checks a child's forehead for heat down the hall. A locker block has been removed entirely. Blank drywall in its place, like a scar someone troweled smooth to convince a mirror to forgive them. And for a second, the corridor looks new enough to lie. The lie is that nothing happened, of course. The truth is that something did. And then something else arrived wearing competence. And you can't tell whether competence is armor or camouflage when you meet it in a school. PG-13 dread prefers the seam to the sutures. So your eyes keep finding the joint where new tile kisses old, where paint deepens half a tone in a rectangle. Someone will explain as primer choice if asked, and you do not ask. Nights bring different dreams now, not doors, not breath, but maps. Your school unfurls into old surveyor grids, crossed with chalk lines only you can read. And you trace routes that zig, where roots should zag, because safety likes a corner you can own with your back. You wake with a sense memory of chalk, dust on the side of your hand, like when teachers let you erase the board. And that's almost comforting, until you remember the board is inside your head, and someone else has been writing on it lately. You feed the fan another hour, because it asks for so little and gives back so much. A hum that calls your nervous system by a nickname and makes it laugh once before sleeping. If this were a campfire story, you'd add a log and keep going. As a bedtime one, you lower your voice and let the dark lean in to hear the next part. A week slides by wearing the face of normal, and then the school issues new badges with chips embedded, a safety measure. They say a modernization, like moving from chalk to smart boards, but for people, not equations. The chip pings gateways that count you into rooms, as if rooms were hungry mouths learning arithmetic. And your teachers act relieved, as the system proves it can turn a building into a spreadsheet. And spreadsheets are comforting, because they pretend columns can catch what breath cannot. You hold the badge like it's a small pet that needs both hands, and the weight is wrong for the word safety. But you accept it, because choosing is a luxury. You are not always permitted to practice outside. A van idles without decals again, and a man in a suit without affiliation writes something in a notebook like he is balancing a checkbook that owns the block. And you decide not to wave because anonymity looks allergic to friendliness. History wants its portion, so you give it something that isn't a ghost but feels like one. During the Northeast blackout of 1965, stories bloomed of UFOs and sabotage and secret tests. But officialdom settled later on human error and a relay trip that cascaded like falling dominoes. Historians still debate whether the mythology rose because the dark was vast, or because people need explanations they can tell at dinner without breaking the plates. You keep both in your pocket, the relay that tripped and the rumor that sang, because your day holds both. The thing the suit will write, and the story a seventh grader will whisper into a sleeve on the bus to make friends nod. Quirky bonus to soothe the edges. There's a lighthouse in Wales said to blink in a pattern locals call the eyelid, and sailors swear it helps them sleep. You don't know if that's true, but your fan hum does the job, and you accept folklore that makes mercy. You fall asleep mid-count once and wake up smiling because you only reached 5, which means you owed one breath to the dark, and the dark was kind and returned it. Back at school, the rumor blossoms, a sound in the auditorium that starts at seat E12, only when the stage lights at 1/4, and the work door at the rear is propped with a paint can. A triangulation that seems too specific to invent, which of course means someone invented it and got lucky, or someone didn't, and the world you know is bigger than the equipment can diagram. You go at lunch because some dares call your name like a substitute who doesn't know you're trying to be invisible. And the room is a cave full of neat rows of stalagmites labeled assigned. And the light, when a tech flips it, sits quietly as if waiting for someone to whistle. You put your palm to the seat back and feel nothing but theater dust and old gum wishes under the armrest. And then the temperature dips the way it does in a freezer when the compressor kicks, only softer, only nearer your skin, and you say the breathing numbers under your breath because you've trained yourself into a small religion that fits in your lungs. The tech says, "Ha," and snaps a photo, even though the photo will show nothing, because some patterns demand to be respected. And respect sometimes looks like clicking a shutter to keep your hands from being rude. On the way out, your badge stutters at the sensor, and you freeze because frozen has served you before. The light stays red a hair longer than a hair, then swings to green like it was always going to, and you are being dramatic. And you accept the gentle scold because you deserve it, and also because maybe you don't. In the hall, a class passes. The kind of herd move schools know how to orchestrate to convince everyone that the word flow is not a metaphor, and you tuck yourself to the cinder block, letting them stream, your furniture trick inverted into a wall trick, defensive geometry that doesn't require apology. A teacher thanks you without words as she shepherds the end of the line, and gratitude feels like a hand on your shoulder without the hand, which is the only way you'd accept it today. PG-13 dread keeps to its lane and lets the bell ring too loud, and you love it for that bells are the least haunted things you know, even if historians still debate why some ring without wind in old stories, and whether anyone bothered to check the ropes. You decide not to tell your parents about the auditorium dip because you are practicing the art of rationing terror like ingredients in a recipe that yields sleep. And anyway, you owe them a night without the suit at the door and the clicker on the coffee table. You ask instead if anyone knows how to make the fan sound like rain, and your mother shows you an app, and your father shows you a hack, and together they cobble a storm in your room which behaves and does not leak, and you sleep under it like a child who has earned that word. Morning arrives obediently, and the tree line is only a seam again, and you say thank you to the seam because gratitude is a superstition you do not plan to outgrow. When your badge taps green without a pause, you feel silly for the way your chest celebrates, and then you decide silliness is a kind of parade worth throwing when the route is as short as a doorframe. You've been avoiding one idea the way you avoid looking directly into the wrong red. What if nothing came through at all? What if the building itself was borrowed? Rooms loaned like books to a reader with odd tastes, and the kind of library card that doesn't involve a desk. Only attention summoned like a bell that the world rings when it wants to see if you're listening. If that's the axis, then the doors are courtesies and the handles are theater, and your safety is less a lock and more a posture you practice. Head turned, breath counted, stillness installed like software that runs in the background without draining the battery. Historians still debate whether some hauntings are place-bound or traveler-bound, whether the story sticks to the bricks or to the person who heard it. And you say out loud in the empty hall, I am not a door, because words make shapes in the air, and shapes have been making themselves around you lately. You wait a beat to see if attention answers, and when it does not, you go to class like a person who remembers how to be furniture and a lamp, depending on what the hour requests. Your town is good at pretending it has only one street, so news can walk down it and be seen by everyone. But the street stays empty. The missing principle is a notice board without a flyer. The janitor is a hallway without a whisper. And Kyle is a name people skip, like a crack they don't want to test with their ankle. Parents practice the phrase privacy for the family with their mouths, while their eyes practice counting school buses. And the superintendent sends an email about continuity of learning that reads like it was written by a person who irons their socks and never looks at tree lines after lunch. The counselor reminds everyone that rumor is a reflex and asks classrooms to title their feelings like essays, introduction, body, conclusion, as if a rubric could file down barbs. And you appreciate the effort, even while deciding your fear prefers free verse and too many commas outside. An unmarked van idles long enough to become a character, and the driver writes something you can't read in a notebook you're certain has tabs, and you call that feeling inference, so it behaves. You adopt a new rule: never be the first to the door when the bell rings. You let 3 people pass, 4 on odd days, and teach yourself to love the slowness of standing up, as if you've been glued to the seat for your own good. In the corridor, badge gates blink an unfriendly green that still counts as permission, and you find yourself thanking electronics under your breath, because gratitude is a superstition that costs nothing and sometimes pays. Folklore inches along the lockers in post-it notes of voice. Someone heard a giggle under the stairwell with no one under it. Someone else found a warm patch of floor like a sunbeam with no windows. And you file both under place memory because it sounds respectful and doesn't require you to run. PG-13 Dread keeps its contract. No gore. No jump scares you can't talk yourself around. And instead rubs a thumb across the grain of ordinary until it shines the wrong way. You eat lunch sitting on a concrete planter that thinks it's a bench. And the sky is correct for once. Blue, honest, threaded with plain noise. And you talk to your friend about trivialities, because trivia is social CPR. Then the conversation finds the drain rumor again. Eyes, hands, a red glimmer that blinks when you don't, and your friend laughs and says, like the battle of Lowe's angels, all nerves, no aliens. And you nod, because official reports later called that night a false alarm triggered by a weather balloon and jumpy searchlights. Even though people still tell the story with saucers in it when the porch light is low, another site framed it as a mob of explanations, chasing one lack of certainty. Red flares, jittery gunners, and a city learning what fear sounds like in its own sky. The phrase "war nerves" is neat, and neatness is how closets hide. You add, historians still debate the ratios of hysteria and hardware, because you like the way that sentence buys you time to watch your friend's face unclench without pretending everything is harmless. A teacher pulls you aside after class to ask how you're sleeping, and you tell the truth in parts, better with a fan. Dreams are maps now. I practice being furniture. And the teacher says, that's not furniture, that's posture. And you put the compliment somewhere soft in the quiet, They mention the radium girls in a way that doesn't feel like a dare women who were told sparkle meant health and learned better by losing, and whose cases taught a country to test, to monitor, to write law that names bones. Historians still debate how much the companies knew and when, but not that the women paid the tuition for all that certainty. The article you read said workplace safety grew teeth because those women glowed where they shouldn't. And you think of suits with meters and phrases like exposure profile, and decide you will accept monitoring if it means no one has to glow to be believed. Next time, the teacher doesn't say next time, and you both appreciate the discipline. By midweek, the auditorium rumor graduates to ritual. Kids go in groups of 3 for science, set the stage lights to 1/4, prop the rear work door with a paint can, and lay a phone on seat E12 with the camera open, as if the room will perform if it feels recorded. You go once, because fears are smaller when folded into field trips, and the light behaves like a light, white, boring domestic, and then goes dim in a patch at the exact aisle where no dimmer is supposed to reach, and you count your breaths as a test pattern. The phone video later shows nothing but shake and dust motes, which is correct because wrongness rarely auditions on demand. But everyone in your group agrees the air did something. A consensus that holds the way shared recipes do even when no one measures. You keep the story PG-13 out of instinct, and it repays you by sitting in your chest like a folded letter you will read again when the house is quiet. Back at home, your father asks casually if your badge ever hiccups at the gate, and you say once or twice, and he nods like he has a spreadsheet you'll never see and loves you by populating cells. Your mother suggests chamomile, and you make a joke about becoming a plant, and she laughs because jokes are towels thrown over cold metal, making it touchable for a minute. You add rain to your room's sound mix, and the fan becomes weather, and you fall asleep mid-count, which is the nervous system's way of sending you a thumbs-up emoji without a phone. In the night, you dream the hallway again, but this time you're not in it. You're a camera on the ceiling, a quiet machine that understands doors are courtesies and gives them the privacy to be shy. Next morning, the counselor reads a statement about collective resilience over the intercom, and the phrase lands like confetti that refuses to be swept. It looks nice from tall places and annoys you up close, which is honest enough to forgive. You answer a survey about support services and click adequate because you're trying to be generous with strangers' best efforts, and you think of 1780s New England dark day, noon candles, a red sun, and the way people wrote sermons first and science after. Historians still debate the blend of smoke, fog, and cloud, but no one argues that ordinary life faltered and then resumed, as if resuming were a sacrament. Sometimes you suspect resuming is your town's entire religion, ordained by school bells and enforced by badge gates. Other times you think bravery is a quieter congregation that meets under your ribs with the fan for choir. Either way you show up, you sit down, you practice the posture that says, if attention comes, it can look through glass, but not through you. By Friday, you realize you haven't looked at the tree line for 2 days and feel superstitious about the math. So you grant it a glance like feeding a stray cat and pretend you don't see the way shadow pools in a neat ellipse exactly where the ball once sat. You don't walk over, not because you're scared, but because abstaining is a skill too, and skills deserve reps. You call this maintenance, the way lighthouse keepers called routine tasks sacred, because they kept ships from learning the reef's name the hard way. Historians still debate whether some lighthouse legends were PR, morality plays told with kerosene, but the blink patterns were real enough to keep maps honest. And you decide your blink pattern is look away, breathe in 4, breathe out 6, proceed. You proceed because the badge gate just turned green without waiting, and that counts as an omen you choose to accept. You don't need a headline to know what you know if it comes back, and you refuse to pick a pronoun for a thing that behaves like weather. It won't knock. It will borrow. It will ask the building to remember a shape it tried to forget, and your job will be to remember your own shape faster. The fan will help. The numbers will help. The posture will help. The tiny historical facts you carry like talismans will help. Because debate is proof. Someone stayed up all night arguing the dark into sentences. You have learned how to be furniture, a wall, and sometimes a lamp. You have learned doors are manners, not shields. You have learned that attention can smell like warm coins and move like wet footsteps. And still, you walked the hallway and came back. That is not a happy ending, exactly, but it is an ending for today. And today is the size of story you are willing to hold. A month is long enough for a school to molt and pretend its new skin was always there, fresh paint settling into cinder block pores, bulletin boards blooming with benign announcements, and a bell schedule that clicks its heels and insists yesterday was ordinary and tomorrow will be too. Trust it. The badge gates chirp like birds that learned numbers, logging bodies into rooms as if attendance could domesticate whatever tried to borrow the building. And teachers smile with the thin relief of people who have trained spreadsheets to purr. You take your seat and find that math still holds its shape, which is a mercy. Equations don't care about rumors or vanished principles. They only care whether your hands keep the line straight across the equal sign. Outside, the unmarked vans come less often. The notebooks close more quickly, and it feels false to call that a good sign, even if everyone wears the expression that says it anyway for practice. Stories have a way of varnishing themselves when told indoors. So the locker room drain becomes a theater of eyes. The auditorium seat becomes a pilgrimage site. And the east hallway grows a chill, the size of a grown person's breath. PG-13 Dread loves this work because it can thrum along the edges without showing teeth. You collect the tailies the way some kids collect enamel pins, not to trade, to sort. This one has the wrong red flicker. That one shares the wet footstep cadence. Another has a pocket of heat instead of cold, like the bubbled clock, plastic, in the blackout's wake. Your friend says it's like the Battle of Los Angeles. An entire city convinced the sky was full of visitors when it was really searchlights and nerves and a weather balloon. And you nod, because officialdom named it war nerves and filed it under understandable errors, a folder that comforts until it doesn't. Another source calls it a cascade of misreads, red flares, shell bursts, and gunners who'd been trained to shoot first at shadows. Historians still debate the mix of hysteria and hardware, which is useful language when a hallway tries to remember being night at noon. When sleep returns, it does so with conditions. Bring rain sounds. Bring the fan. Bring the 4 in and 6 out you learned in the counselor's office. And bring a willingness to be furniture for 15 minutes before becoming a lamp if needed. Your body signs the contract and honors it mostly. Sometimes you wake with your hand on the bedroom door handle and talk to it the way you talk to skittish animals. Not now. We're not opening for anything that doesn't knock like a person. And the handle respects that because you said it like a promise. In the quiet, a historical fact pads over and sits by your ankle. The New England dark day in 1780 turned noon to dusk and put candles on tables. Historians still debate the exact recipe of smoke, fog, and cloud. But the lesson is that days can misbehave, and you can still finish your meal without the sky's permission. You stroke that fact like a cat until it purrs, and the room acknowledges your superstition with a sleep you don't have to wrestle for once. Back at school, you try the auditorium again because curiosity is a noisy roommate. The tech sets the stage, lights to quarter, props the rear work door with the paint everyone has agreed is part of the ritual now. And seat E12 welcomes a phone camera like it's a small, eager priest. The air near the aisle remembers the freezer soft dip again, which could be HVAC or story, or both, in the kind of ratio historians still debate in other contexts. And you count your breaths because the ritual is supposed to be boring, until it suddenly isn't. The video shows dust and nothing, which is correct in the way are correct about bones. Tools don't owe you drama just because you bought batteries for them. And you respect that the way you respect tide tables, even when the beach looks flat. PG-13 holds the boundary. No faces in the pixels, no hands from drains, just that quiet push on the eardrum that says attention is near. So please be the wall and not the door today. Your teacher mentions the radium girls again, in passing, as if to calibrate a room full of hearts. Women learned the hard way that glow can be notation for harm. And law learned to put names on precautions. Historians still debate timelines and culpability, but not the part where denial gave way to paperwork with teeth. You tuck the story next to your own appointment slips and badge logs, and decide that if monitoring is a form of respect, You will allow it to sit with you at lunch and drink from your bottle without apology. The counselor adds a funnier talisman during group sleep paralysis is why some people wake and feel a weight on their chest. And the old hag is how older tailies described that wait before REM, atonia, was a household phrase. Both explanations can keep company without fighting, which is a kindness you wish would trend. Historians still debate whether folklore collapses when science stands up, but the better rooms let them sit side by side, like two clocks set to slightly different cities, both useful, both honest about their coordinates. You go a week without looking at the tree line, and then glance, as if feeding a superstition you would mock in daylight. The shadow sits where physics says it should, which is a relief you pretend not to feel. A kid says he saw the principal at the East End yesterday, right at the corner where the badge scanner used to lag. But when he called sir, the man didn't turn, and when he looked again, the hall was empty and too warm. A coin held too long in a fist, you file it with the other stories under place memory, and breathe, because filing is different from believing, and also the same. Your badge pings green on the first tap 3 days in a row, and you let that become a ritual too. Palm bless. Ping. Step. Like a lighthouse blink you can carry in your pocket to make maps behave. You don't need the story to resolve to keep walking, which is a small, excellent secret you share with your shoes every time they find the next tile. One evening, you go to the edge of the woods with a sandwich because someone online said offerings are how you apologize to places. And while you know that's not science, it isn't cruelty either. And small kindnesses are a currency that spend well even if they don't buy the thing you want. The air inside the trees presses once on your inner ear like a reminder, and then relents, which is as close to a nod as a patch of woods knows how to offer. And you incline your head back because manners are cheap and you own some. You whisper, not me, not mine, not today. And it sounds ridiculous and wise in equal measure, the way prayers do when whispered by someone who won't admit the word fits. PG-13 draws the curtain gently, no eyes open, no hands reach. The breath against your nape belongs to wind, and you permit the wind to be the answer this time, because answers deserve a turn. On your walk home, you rehearse the sentence you will use if anyone asks how you're doing. Practicing posture, you'll say, which is friendlier than being furniture and truer than fine. And your therapist will probably give you a gold star you'll pretend to decline. At the kitchen table, your father spreads bills and calendars like navigational charts. And for the first time, you wonder if his certainty was something he learned to perform for you rather than a native habitat. You add him to your inventory of people to be gentle with when the lights go wrong. Your mother asks if you want the rain tonight, and you say yes, please, and she smiles like she's creating weather as a service, which is the kind of power you trust more than badge gates. 3 breaths after lights out, you are a floor lamp dimmed to a soft glow, 3 breaths after that your furniture with a blanket. And it turns out that's enough to be human today. The story's thin, the way fog thins, not vanishing so much as getting bored with itself. And the adults take that as proof the world has returned to standard operating procedure. Your body, which has better record keeping, files it under quiet for now and keeps a space open on the shelf. The badge gates barely blink anymore. Green arrives before your hand asks, like a friend finishing your sentence. And teachers stop watching the scanners the way gamblers watch dice, which is good for their shoulders, if not for your curiosity. Hallway air tastes normal again, dust, pencil shavings, cafeteria echoes, and you almost miss the way attention changed the flavor, because at least that strangeness admitted it was there. Normal has always been the better disguise. You practice your posture anyway, furniture when stillness is required, a lamp when the dark needs dimming, and the repetition gives your bones a job description that isn't just survive. At lunch, someone tries out a fresh theory, like a new backpack. Maybe the school fell sideways, not into night, but into someone else's noon. And it's easier to entertain because it contains fewer teeth. PG-13 dread thrives on these tidy metaphors, the ones that can be set gently on a tray and passed around without anyone losing fingers. You nod and throw in a detail about 1965's Northeast blackout, the relay trip that cascaded through the grid like dominoes doing what they were born to do. Official reports traced it to one miscalibrated device near Ontario, and historians still debate whether the mythology, UFOs, sabotage, baby booms, rose because darkness is generous to imagination, or because people prefer a story large enough to equal the size of the night. A Smithsonian piece said radio knit the city together, and even now some folks swear they saw fireballs over the power station, which is either cosmic coincidence or human patterning. Depending on which porch you sit on, you appreciate both porches because the view from each changes what counts as evidence. Your friend laughs and says, "So we had a relay trip, but for halls." And you let the joke land because humor is a life jacket designed for small waters. You ask the counselor if practicing posture forever is a plan or a phase, and they say it's a skill like reading. Once learned, it never leaves, and you don't have to use it all day to be grateful you can. The answer is kind enough to keep. They steer the group towards sleep paralysis folklore. How the old hag sat on chests before REM, atonia, had a name, and how both frames can coexist without canceling each other. Historians still debate whether folklore decays when science labels it, but a 2015 review suggests the cultural costume modifies the fear without inventing it from scratch. You leave with a new sentence. Both can be true, and it feels like a key that opens more than one door at once without setting off alarms. In the hallway, the bell rings, and for once, you let yourself like it without analysis. The clean, obedient sound of time doing what it promised on the brochure. After school, you head to the field without a plan and find the tree line performing transparency like a talent show. No extra shadows, no heat mirages, only the tired dignity trees where when children judge them, you step in just far enough to make your inner ear perk, which it does, polite as a host checking coats. The pressure changes a hair, and you answer with 4 in, 6 out. The liturgy that turns panic into an obliging dog. No breath, no red, just the memory of both. A perfume on the air that isn't there and is. And you say, not today, into your collar. And do not feel foolish, because the trees have heard worse. On the way out, you glance back and half expect to see seat E12 sitting among the roots, a phone glowing blankly. What you see instead is light doing its respectable chores between leaves. An honest household at dusk. At home, your father reads a piece about the 1965 blackout and says, one relay, like an incantation against cascading failures. You nod and add that some legends insist on their own oxygen baby booms. UFOs, long after the engineers have closed their binders. And both layers become the story people tell when they pass salt and want to feel bigger than their chairs. You slide in a lighthouse aside because you promised yourself to keep a quirky charm or 2 in your pocket. Blinking patterns called characteristics kept ships honest to maps. It's prosaic and miraculous at once, like badge gates that turn green. And historians still debate how much of lighthouse lore is PR versus hard practice. But flashes were facts mariners trusted more than rumors. Your mother calls your room's rain mix homemade lighthouse weather, and you like that enough to make it a ritual. Storms in a box to mark safe entries and exits. You sleep accordingly. Fan hums steady as a Fresnel lens. Breath counting timed to a revolving beam you can't see, but feel when it returns. Morning unspools without commentary, and the school day fits well enough that you almost forget to listen for jiggling that isn't there. Forgetting is a mercy misnamed. You decide it's not absence, but permission granted to the present. In science, a substitute teacher sets a video about radiation safety that somehow manages to mention the radium girls without treating them like trivia bones that glowed. Courtrooms that learned grief into policy. Historians still debate the exact roots of accountability, but the map is legible now because someone paid the cartographer. You accept the lesson like a vaccination, small sting, long benefit, and tuck it beside your own tests and numbers. And the day the suits stopped coming because their meters were satisfied, you have learned to let paperwork be a kind of prayer when the sky won't pick up its phone. By last bell, the rumor mill is grinding flour fine enough to bake donuts, with seat E12 hummed again. The East Hall felt warm like a coin. The drain blinked red, or didn't, depending on whose cousin was. Peachy 13 Dread is content to let the bake sale run without supervision. You help a friend with their bag, because kindness is the least haunted action you know. It makes makes rooms choose you for ordinary reasons. The badge gate turns green fast. Blink, bless, and you feel silly for counting that as a sign. And decide to feel silly on purpose. Intentional silliness is a charm no one can confiscate at the door. Outside, the unmarked van isn't there, which your chest translates as permission to breathe deeper. And you do, not because the van kept breath hostage, but because relief likes to anchor itself to specifics. That evening, you write down 3 sentences and pin them where your eyes can trip over them. I am not a door. Both can be true, and maintenance is a skill. And the space between them is where you plan to live for a while. The fan hum signs its name under your pledge, and the rain app stamps a lighthouse blink in the margin. And you fall asleep in the scandalously luxurious knowledge that not every chapter requires an event, and should attention return warm coin, wet step, red that isn't your posture has been rehearsed to within an inch of performance. Historians will still debate causes in other rooms, but your body knows outcomes it prefers and is ready to push the scene toward them. For now, the hallways are hallways, the windows are windows, and your breath is yours in sets of 10, divisible by calm. You start keeping time in softer units. How many nights the rain app has whispered without interruption. How many mornings the badge gate turned green before you lifted your hand. How many lunches were spent talking about anything except drains and doors. And that wrong red, continuity, is a spell adults cast by setting up tables and paperwork in old rooms and calling it learning. And even though a part of you wants to roll your eyes, another part honors it. Routines are bridges built out of ordinary planks, and bridges matter even when they seem small. A district memo uses the phrase continuity of learning, which sounds like an incantation stitched from meetings, and argues for preparedness, quick remote pivots, and simple assessments to measure loss. All the bullet points that let humans pretend chaos can be managed if the font is clear enough. You don't mind the pretending. Illusions can soothe. And soothing is medicine, even if historians still debate whether education's crises reshape systems or simply varnish the same structures with resilience rhetoric. Nights are no longer negotiations. The fan hum is a friend who doesn't overshare, and the rain track is a lighthouse blink in audio form that keeps your course even when the room looks faithful. You read that pink noise sometimes deepens slow wave sleep and shortens the time it takes for brains to find that deeper water. White noise can mask interruptions by smoothing the acoustic landscape like plaster over a wall of bumps. But evidence is mixed, and context matters, lab or home, night long or at sleep onset. A 2021 review called noise a sleep aid in some settings by partially masking spikes and reducing arousals, which is the unromantic way to say. A steady hush can keep smaller anxieties from knocking too loudly. Another overview notes that constant broad-spectrum noise can reduce awakenings and stabilize sleep architecture. But cautions there's no one-size-fits-all prescription. Bodies choose their lullabies, and yours has chosen the storm that isn't a storm, and fans that pretend to be oceans. School fits again in small ways. The principal's office has a new nameplate, unannounced but unmissable, and the corridor near the east end smells like lemon cleaner instead of hot coins. The badge systems chirp. Teachers regain their indoor voices, and laughter learns to lean on things without checking for heat first. You finish a quiz and realize you didn't listen for handles once, the kind of progress that never gets extra credit, but should. And you fold it in your pocket like a note to your future self that reads, "See, you can do this while seated and breathing." Outside, the unmarked vans have become a memory with edges. You try to recall license plates and find you can't, which is a mercy, because remembering too clearly would assign characters to a story that doesn't deserve protagonists. PG-13, dread abides by its contract. It lingers at the edges like stage crew in black, ready to roll the wrongs set back on stage. But for now, the right props hold. The counselor circles back with a group check-in, armed with questions that know how to sit quietly and wait for answers. You talk about posture without using the furniture joke, and others talk about fans and rain and counting, and how rituals became scaffolds that held up more than bedtime. They held up days. Someone mentions a paper on sleep paralysis and old hag stories from different cultures. How the stories change the costume, but not the actor. Historians still debate whether science erases folklore or merely gives fear a different last name. And the room nods because names have been tricky lately. The counselor shares a thought that sounds like a hinge clicking into place. Both frames can make kindness. One says this is something your brain does. The other says you are not alone, because others met this weight too, and made stories sturdy enough to carry. You leave with a new ritual added to your set. If fear visits at the edge of sleep, you will name the visit, then count out the room, then call the fan a lighthouse, and let the beam swing back around. History creeps back as a comfort. A piece about the 1965 blackout mentions how radio braided neighborhoods into one attentive organism, how voices steadied hands without knowing the names of the blocks they steadied. You latch onto that steadiness without full knowledge, because it's a nice way to think about teachers and badges, and the person who mops the East Hall. The same timelines note rumors of UFOs that persisted long after engineers replaced relays, and historians still debate whether big myths are harm or balm in the aftermath of big nights. You decide it depends on whether the myth keeps you indoors forever or helps you carry your bag into the next morning. You hold onto one more odd charm for the road. Lighthouses use unique flashing characteristics, so mariners can tell which friend is which. A detail so practical it feels poetic. If badge gates had characteristics, you'd know your schools blink anywhere. And perhaps that's the point. to make the familiar flash in a pattern that says welcome without words. You smile at the thought, and then actually do the remarkable. You forget to be ready for a while, and the while lasts all the way to 7th period. On Friday, the auditorium tradition is declared over by nobody in particular. Kids lose interest. The seat is just a seat, and the paint can goes back to being a paint can. You sneak one last look out of habit, and the air does nothing dramatic, which you file under victory, because boredom after terror is a luxury you protect with both hands. In the hallway, a teacher drops a stack of quizzes, and a dozen bodies bend in reflex to help. The kind of choreography that convinces worlds to be kind, even when they forgot briefly how. You gather 3 papers and hand them over like the smallest possible prayer. PG-13, dread bows out for the day. Content with a curtain call of silence, and you let the credits roll in ordinary font. When night comes, you don't consult the fan or the rain first. You stand at the window and listen to the honest wind move, leaves the way, a hand rustles pages, and you let the sound be what it is, unmixed, unlabeled, free. Then you turn the fan on anyway, because maintenance is a skill, not a dare, and you promised yourself long ago to practice the skills that make tomorrows possible. In the space between breaths, a ghost of wet footsteps passes through memory on tiptoe. The red that isn't tries to glow and fails, and the handle that once made your name into a bell quiets because you did not stand at the door to answer. You sleep, not from exhaustion, not from pressure, but by choice, a verb your body has relearned like a favorite noun. The woods wait like a paused sentence, the kind that keeps its verb hidden until the reader leans forward after weeks of skirting the edge. Curiosity wins the coin toss, and the soles of your shoes choose leaves over hallway tile again. Respectful as a guest, returning a borrowed book to a shelf that wasn't yours. You step 30 feet in because that's where the world tilted last time, and your inner ear does its subtle bow of recognition. The same tiny press, the same swallow, like a relay tripping in a grid that only powers attention. And you think of how one device in 1965 cascaded darkness through cities that had thought themselves smarter than night. The air smells honest, sap, damp bark, sun-warmed shade. And yet the body inventories for coins and warm patches and a breath that isn't wind. Posture clicks in automatically. 4 in, 6 out. Count until your mind stops trying to open a door no one is knocking on. You say aloud the sentence that became a hinge in you. I am not a door. And the trees accept the boundary the way good neighbors do. Nod once, then go back to their own concerns. On the ground lies a circle of flattened grass you don't remember from before. Not exactly a nest, not exactly a mark. Folklore is greedy for circles, for fairy rings and burned prints. And PG-13, dread obliges, with a shiver that knows enough to stay at the surface and not reach for claws you will not give it. You test the circle's air with a hand the way cooks test oil, not touching, just hovering. And the warmth is nothing like a sunbeam, more like a coin cupped in a palm, familiar and wrong. And you withdraw because familiar plus wrong equals respect with distance. A thought tries on your tongue. Maybe it never crossed. Maybe it pressed until the building offered an outline to wear. Historians still debate whether some hauntings are bound to person or a place, and the idea that attention borrows architecture rather than breaking in feels like the kind of theory you can breathe with. You back out slowly, as if leaving a chapel while others are still praying, because leaving like a door slam is how stories get sharpened, and you are not in the mood to carry knives home. Back in the field, the sky is so sincere it looks photoshopped, cloudless and blue with plain scratches the color of optimism. You sit on the concrete planter that claims to be a bench and think about rescue tools no one calls rescue fans, rain apps, lighthouses in your headphones, blinking patterns called characteristics. So mariners can tell which friend is which prosaic magic that works precisely because someone measured it. You like knowing each lighthouse owns a signature, that blink patterns are grammar for coastlines. The way your badge gate now feels like punctuation you can trust, green as a comma, a pause before the next clause of the day. The thought steadies you the way steady radio voices steadied New York in 1965. No explanations, just companionship that stitched neighborhoods into a single listening body until engineers put names to the error, and everyone decided, for practical reasons, to forgive the dark for being itself. You translate that into a private instruction. Companionship first, diagnostics later. It works for buildings, and it works for bones that still remember how to be furniture when necessary. School shrinks back to fit mortal concerns, quizzes, a poster about club sign-ups, a teacher who can't get the projector to listen. You help with the HDMI cable because ordinary problems are a luxury you plan to protect like an heirloom. The counselor invites a small group to talk about sleep aids, and you contribute your field notes. Rain induces slow wave depth for some. Pink noise can nudge onset. White noise masks spikes. Evidence is mixed and contextual, but plenty of studies endorse auditory scaffolding when the night shows teeth. A paper calls noise a sleep aid by smoothing acoustic landscapes and reducing arousals. And another review says broad spectrum sound stabilizes nights, but warns there's no universal prescription. The room agrees to treat lullabies like shoes. Try on, walk around, keep what doesn't blister. You leave with your fan knighted again, not because gadgets are charms, but because maintenance is a skill, and every skill deserves celebration when it holds. The auditorium legend burns out not with a bang, but a shrug. Teenagers are efficient editors of their own mythologies when attention drifts. And seat E12 loses its ritual timer and returns to being a place for gum, elbows, and occasional epiphanies disguised as boredom. You take that as a mercy. The way museums take quiet weekdays as oxygen. And you think about how resilient systems don't erase crisis so much as absorb it into procedures. Continuity of learning, alternative timetables, remote pivots that read like someone convinced uncertainty to stand in a single file line for a while. Another policy, memo hints at lessons learned, simple tools, clear channels, compassionate grading. And a think piece says school could emerge stronger after shocks if it treats resilience as more than a press release. Historians still debate whether crises reform institutions or merely change the frosting, and you decide you can live with frosting while pushing for better cake. You volunteer to help restock the nurse's office with spare headphones and granola bars, and the tiny logistics feel like sandbags placed exactly where a future leak might sulk. Evenings light. You watch a documentary where someone says the Battle of Lowe's Angels was mostly searchlights tangling with anti-aircraft bursts against a nervous sky, and you believe them without needing to amputate everyone else's porch stories about saucers and flares. Historians still debate the blend of hysteria and hardware, and you're comfortable keeping both jars on the same shelf labeled "Use responsibly." That comfort spreads to other categories. Old hag folklore beside Ramatonia, radium girls beside industrial hygiene, radio companionship beside relay failure, pairs that don't cancel but converse, leaving you with less need to pick a single narrative like a favorite child. You realize, with a start that is not fear, that the hallway story in your chest has finally stopped pacing and chosen a chair. Posture does that. Given time and a fan, you sleep with the window cracked for honest wind, the fan set low for old friendship, and the rain paused because tonight real leaves are enough to turn pages on their own. A Saturday arrives without harm, and in the luxury of unassigned hours, you walk past the school on purpose, hands empty, head clear. The building looks like a retired athlete who still keeps a gym bag by the door just in case, and you nod at it the way you nod at old teammates. Gratitude without nostalgia's glue. No vans, no suits, no notebooks. Only a groundskeeper doing math with a rake and a trash bag, which seems like the right ratio of calculation to care for a place that was briefly borrowed by something that doesn't love plumbing. You consider whether to place another sandwich at the wood's edge and decide not today. Offerings are for debts, and today feels square. PG-13 dread waves from a far corner of the lot like a neighbor who once had loud parties and now just smiles and minds their mail. You wave back and go home to do laundry, which is exactly the right size of victory for this morning. Night brings a smaller ritual. 3 sentences on your wall. I am not a door. Both can be true. Maintenance is a skill. And below them, a doodle of a lighthouse blinking a characteristic only you could decode. you add a fourth line, new and a little brave. Curiosity is not consent. The fan approves with its single syllable of weather. The window stays cracked half an inch, the bed holds, and somewhere far off a train threads the town with its own steady grammar, reminding you that not every long sound is a warning. Some are simply a promise to arrive, and then continue. You let the day close without guard duty at the mental door, because the handle isn't jiggling, and because when it does again, you'll know the script, and you won't improvise fear where posture will do. Sleep comes as a decision rather than a collapse, which is how you can tell you walked yourself here, instead of being carried by dread with wet shoes. You spend a Saturday with the past like it's a hobby. One tab for the 1780 dark day. One for the Lowe's angel searchlights. One for radium girls. One for sleep folklore. Because sometimes curating other people's mysteries shrinks your own to a scale your hands can hold without shaking. On one page, the sun goes red at noon, and birds go quiet. On another, tracers stitch the sky, while gunners shoot at their own confusion. On a third, watch dials glow, and the law learns to pronounce accountability with teeth. On a fourth, a chest-sitting hag shares a bench with Rematonia and doesn't push. Historians still debate how these pairs resolve, but the comfort is not in resolution. It's in the proof that minds keep making rooms where fear can talk without raising its voice. You click the tabs closed one by one, like extinguishing candles after a vigil, and let your screen reflect your face again, as if to say, present tense can come back now. You let it. Monday, the school smells purely of school dry erase, cafeteria steam, sneaker rubber. And if a corridor remembers coin heat, or a drain remembers red, they keep that memory polite. The way old friends skip that one summer when they didn't speak. Your badge gate flashes green before you finish the gesture, and you feel absurdly seen by a machine in a way that's almost nourishing. Sometimes being counted is the same as being kept. In homeroom, a teacher lays out a schedule that clicks like cutlery, quizzes and labs, and a pep rally that feels faintly indecent after everything. And yet, right in the way small joys declare themselves. PG-13 dread waving from the bleachers to say it won't attend today's performance. You practice posture anyway, not because you're scared, but because skills are stronger when used at non-emergencies. The way swimmers practice in calm water, so panic has fewer places to hide when waves get ideas. At lunch, a kid insists the east hallway warmed again, like a coin, and another says their badge lagged one extra heartbeat. Folklore is a garden, and the rumors are volunteer tomatoes, not asked for, but edible if you salt them right. You listen with the generosity you've learned to put on like a hoodie. Maybe they felt something. Maybe they needed to feel something. Maybe you all did. And none of those sentences has to be untrue for the story to do its daily job of letting the building breathe. You offer a lighthouse tidbit because trivia is social softening. Each tower's blink is a characteristic, a signature sailors memorize so coastlines don't change just because weather decides to be theatrical. The lunch table decides your school's characteristic is quick green, no drama. And the joke lowers shoulders you didn't realize were high. You're fine with your building being a lighthouse that learned to count, a small and sturdy ambition for a place that once tried on midnight at noon. Mid-afternoon, the nurse calls for volunteers to restock the Calm Kit's headphones, granola bars, paper fans, and you say yes because logistics are the secular sacraments of resilience. A school that can hand out steady noises and quick sugars and folding air is a school that remembers the difference between lecture and kindness while you label the drawer. A counselor mentions a research roundup on noise and sleep. Pink noise nudges slow wave depth in some. White noise masks spikes. Effects vary, context matters. And you nod like a person sitting in a lighthouse listening to the beam sweep, counting the seconds between turns, because the counting itself is the comfort. A review calls noise a sleep aid, not a miracle, which sounds like truth sturdy enough to stack on. And a separate overview says, careful. Not all brains want the same lullaby. Your kit gets a note. Pick your weather, because options are a moral you want posted in big letters. Someone asks if the rain sound in your room is real, and you shrug. The wind through your cracked window qualifies. The app qualifies. The fan definitely qualifies. The point is that your heart answers to the rhythm, not the source. Evening slides in like a well-trained usher. All hand gestures and aisle lamps. You walk past the school on your way nowhere and tip your chin at the windows, which tip their reflected sky back in the civility of glass that has decided to keep only the day's light for once. No vans, no suits, just sprinklers stitching silver onto the grass, and a groundskeeper counting arcs under their breath. Small math keeps places anchored, and you file that beside badge green first try. As one of your new omens you will not apologize for, you angle toward the woods without entering, because curiosity is not consent, and you say the sentence aloud one more time. I am not a door, not as defiance, but as etiquette, the kind you offer when both parties are trying to be good neighbors after a season of wrongness. PG-13 dread. Ever the professional bows and departs, leaving the stage to evening birds and a far train that strings the town with a humming line you'd call safety if you were the kind of person who said things out loud in public like that. Night returns with no terms to negotiate. You leave the window cracked to let the honest wind edit the room. Set the fan to Fresnel, a private joke you like too much, and watch the dark assemble itself into a trustworthy shape. Before sleeping, you touch the 3 pinned sentences and add a 4th sticky note. When it changes, I don't, because posture, not panic, is your continuity plan. Better than any memo you've skimmed, and kinder than any press release the district could draft. You check your phone only to tell the storm to begin. Then face down it like an offering to a god you don't worship, but respect for running errands on your behalf. Sleep comes like a choice again, tidy as a lighthouse blink, measured as a badge chirp, quiet as a field without coins. And the only footsteps you hear are the ones your mind makes leaving the day without taking anything it doesn't need. Morning has the nerve to be perfect, and you forgive it because forgiveness is cheaper than arguing with weather. The bus sighs, the badge gate chirps its friendly characteristic, and the building holds a temperature you'd call decent if you were reviewing it like a hotel. You find your seat and discover that math and lungs make a good pair. Equations straighten spines, breaths flatten waves, and for 20 minutes the world behaves like a poster about study skills that accidentally told the truth. Between problems, your glance strays to the door glass, not fear, more like muscle memory checking its work. And the quiet beyond it is so ordinary it makes you want to applaud, which is a ridiculous and righteous urge you tuck in your pocket for later. You are almost convinced that if anything wanted to try on your hallway again, it missed its chance, because competence and kindness have colonized the routine so thoroughly there's no space left for wrong light to rent. That confidence lasts until the second half of the period, when the room learns how to hold a silence it didn't schedule. The vents hush mid-exhale. Lights bleed a hair toward dim. Not enough to be wrong, just enough for memory to jog, as if training for a race it swore it had retired from. Your body answers with posture 4 in, 6 out, and the room gratefully copies you, like a chorus taking pitch from a dependable alto. PG-13, dread settles in politely, hat in hands, and waits to see if it will be needed for narration, or can clock out early. The teacher pauses at the board, marker hovering above an equal sign like a referee considering a call. And then the ballast remembers its job. The vents resume their tiny wind, and the room's heartbeat aligns with yours, as if it borrowed your metronome for a measure or two. You smirk at the ceiling for being dramatic and return to finding X, because rarely hides where panic thinks it does. At lunch, the rumor machine tries to spin up. Did you lob a lighthouse fact like a foam ball into a room that might break things? Characteristics, signatures, flashes that tell sailors where they are when fog insists otherwise. It works because everyone wants to be a sailor, sometimes rather than a passenger. And the table chooses your school's blink. Green, pause, green. The kind of detail bodies can carry without spraining. Someone counters with the 1965 blackout trivia, domino relays, radio knitting neighborhoods, UFO stories that refused to evacuate after engineers filed reports, and historians still debate whether myths are harm or balm. You declare them, whether check the forecast before you plan a picnic. And the table laughs because it's lunchtime and laughter is a condiment. You are not the person who keeps rooms together. You are a person with a fan in their pocket and a handful of sentences on a wall at home. But today, Those tools feel like a baton. Anyone can pass without dropping. The thought steadies your sandwich hand more reliably than any badge gate ever could, which is a compliment to bread you did not expect to make. Last bell carries you into afternoon. With a hum you'll later misremember as music, you help a teacher stow a box, nod at the counselor, return a library book on time in what feels like a truce between memory and present tense. The librarian stamps the date with a thunk that sounds like a small gavel ruling in favor of ordinary, and you accept the verdict with appropriate solemnity, because ordinary deserves ceremony when it wins. Outside, the field is washing itself in September light, too honest and gold to hold a secret, and the woods yawn their green mouth, open like a friend who isn't offended by your shoes on their porch. You pause at the edge with the offering you didn't bring, the sandwich you ate, the prayers you ran out of, the bravery you're not spending today, and say the sentence you keep under your tongue for precisely this: curiosity is not consent, and the leaves applaud in a wind that doesn't need your permission to move. On the walk home, you pass the east hallway's windows and catch your reflection trying to look older. You let it, because the trick of survival is not to become something else, but to admit you're more than the last time you counted breaths in the dark. You imagine the vanished like names stitched into a hem: Kyle, the principal, the janitor, not displayed, but present, helping the fabric hang right, not closure, not erasure, just weight that makes the garment fit with gravity's quiet help. A historian's cadence creeps in because it comforts. People still debate whether the Battle of Lowe's Angels was nerves or hardware, whether the dark day was smoke or cloud, whether Old Hag was folklore or Rem's press. The answer that feeds you is yes. Both can be true. And the world is large enough to file contradictions without a fire. You like that filing cabinet so much you buy a metaphorical label maker and print a tiny sticker for your sternum. Both evening, and your room receives you the way a cinema receives a ticket. Come in, sit down, let the lights know who they belong to. The fan sets to Fresnel as a private joke. The window stays cracked for sincerity, and the rain waits its turn like a polite chorus member who doesn't need a solo tonight. You touch the sentences on your wall and add a fifth on a fresh square. If it knocks, I is sass and theology in 5 words, and your nervous system signs off on it with a flourish. Before sleep, you open a notebook and write 3 lines for the version of you who will need them on some later day when the hallway tries on wrong again. I am not a door. Both can be true. Maintenance is a skill, because scripture doesn't have to be ancient to be holy. You close the cover as if closing the lid on a box of light someone loaned you, and the fan hums approval like a radio, knitting the house into one room the night cannot borrow without asking. And then, because stories love symmetry, the building in your head runs the old scene one more time out of habit. Wet footsteps, a red not red, a curious handle. You breathe in 4, out 6, and watch the handle's motion become a metronome without a door attached, a rhythm that belongs to you rather than an invitation. The footsteps pass the way trains do, present, long, purposeful, uninterested in you unless you choose the tracks, and you do not choose them. PG-13. Dread wanders off to smoke behind the auditorium and never comes back from its break. The last thing you feel before sleep is not a breath against your nape, but the small temperature of a room that has finally learned your characteristic. Blink, pause, blink, green, pause, green, arrive, rest, continue. You sleep with the luxury of a person who has decided to keep being a wall until a different kind of light asks nicely. And that decision is the bravest thing you did all day. Slow now, the room loosens its corners, and the ceiling remembers how to be a sky someone once folded and kept for later. And the fan keeps its soft, single syllable, a tiny tide knitting the edges together. Nothing presses the glass. No handle thinks it knows your name. And even the dark turns courteous, stepping lightly, leaving space between footfalls the way careful friends do when walking alongside. Safe is a small word, and it is the right size for this hour, safe enough for breath to set its tools down, safe enough for shoulders to release the day, safe enough for thoughts to dim until they are silhouettes leaning against a fence at dusk. If the mind reaches for old noises, wet steps, coin warm air, a red that never learned to be honest, let it touch them once, then let them dissolve like chalk in rain. Lines running into simpler shapes the window can hold without strain. The building keeps to its role, the badge gate green in memory. The lighthouse blink returned to its coast, and history, which never stops talking entirely, lowers its voice to a murmur polite enough to sleep through. Let the last light in the room be the one behind your eyes, soft as a closed book, and let the last sound be that familiar hush that says the house has decided to keep watch while you drift. When morning comes, it will arrive like a gentle hand on the shoulder, the kind that doesn't startle but reminds, and you will open your eyes into ordinary with enough of the night's calm folded in your pocket to spend carefully, kindly, all day.